There we go.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So
I'll try to find any notes I made.
yeah. Okay. So with the correction that Tom noticed, I feel embarrassed I missed it. Is there anybody that objects to accepting the minutes as corrected? Okay. So, and I don't see any public here. So that brings us to previous old business, the James property. Do we have a current status on that, Michael?
Not from town staff. Town staff reached out twice. So the most recent thing that happened with the town was the walk with the James family, who had been considering donating their parcel to the town. We had the walk where Pnrc members met them out there, guided them along the trail, showed them their parcel. Town staff reached out twice in the following month. I would give them a couple weeks to consider. We've heard nothing in that time. Vicky and I spoke, and she speculated that the family may have been so moved about seeing the parcel, getting out there, feeling the history for themselves, that they may no longer be inclined to donate it to the town. In my most recent email, I had indicated that if they were interested in setting up a conservation easement, we do have model language that they could use, and that could ease them along the process. But we've heard nothing. And so partially this is on the agenda to find out if any of you fine people have heard anything, because town staff have not.
I live under a rock.
That's a beautiful rock. You're sitting on, that's a lovely rock you were sitting under.
I have been in contact with Corinne about the history of the property, which I had sent to her. And I also researched the history of the house on Dodd Road where the James family lived during the 1900s, and had sent that to her. And she responded saying, this was, when was this? In December. She responded saying that they thought after the holidays they might have time to consider it. So that's all I know at this point in time.
All right, that's good to know. Maybe I'll send them an email in February. And
yeah. Corinne also was talking about having her, I think they're teenagers or children, get out and walk to the property. So that's another possibility to have, if I can do a contact and offer to set that up for her. But
you probably would want to do it in the spring.
Yes.
And but you know, if we haven't heard from them, we can offer to do that, because we did offer to do that when we were out there.
Yeah.
So it's already in the conversation.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that might be a good idea.
Yeah. So once the weather starts getting fairly nice to be out, I'll send that email. But sounds like if Michael can do a follow up sometime next month. You know.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I think we'll move on to new business. The housing roundtable. I was down at Longwood Gardens, so I wasn't able to dial in. I don't know who all managed to make. Ken, did you make that housing roundtable?
Ken was in my group. I can confirm he had some very insightful comments.
That was a really interesting meeting.
Yes, I did make it. It's going to be interesting. To sum it up, there's a negative reaction on many people's perspectives to the scale of what is being built in Four Corners. I think they don't want the town to change in that direction. That doesn't mean it isn't going to change, and really, it's no different than what Yukon is building here and there. It's just that it's not as clearly part of Yukon.
Yeah, that's consistent with, there's a Mansfield Connections Facebook group, and that's sentiment is consistent with what I've heard expressed there. I will acknowledge that my only laying in on something like that is to periodically send a link to the planning department story page with a comment, keep track of what's happening.
We appreciate your valiant service on that regard, Jim. Juliana, I would be interested. I don't think you were in the same group that Ken and I were in. We had 3 different breakout rooms. And when I've been discussing with the other planning department staff, we found that the conversations were really different in different groups. So what did you have a different perception than Ken had? Any other takeaways?
Just in addition, I think there were a lot of comments about the look of the buildings, plantings, overwhelming amount of parking, you know, just the way things were laid out, and how close things are to major roads like 195. A lot of concerns about that. I think there was people liked when we were given the options to choose different looks of buildings. People really shied away from the very urban looking ones, which is a lot of what is going in some places.
Yeah, I think an observation I made in our group was that I had similar negative reaction to Store Center when it was being built, because it really changed the character of what was there from suburban setback from the road to urban. And I think I would want to hear how people's attitudes settle down after they live with it for a year or two, and after it's no longer under construction, but landscaped and finished.
I keep thinking back to some of my ecology classes where I learned that a stable environment is one that's changing slow enough that organisms can adapt.
So you're saying we have some adapting to do?
Yeah,
The
some of our
Mansfields-
niches have been seriously compromised.
I think that I went to the same meeting as you're talking about, and one of the issues I heard was how to make the town policies or regulations, and I don't remember the right word, fit with what it is people want, and that maybe what people want hasn't been articulated well in anything that can be acted on by the town. And the other thing isn't really this committee's purview, but the notion that housing for people who don't have any money might be written into something, but if it's not in the deed, it might not last very long. And the idea that things are built, but they aren't maintained perhaps in the way that you would maintain your own house. So that these buildings, these constructions have this lifespan that might not be as long as you would expect. And I just thought that was, I don't know how to think about it, but I thought it was kind of an interesting thought. My house is 120 years old and I don't see it falling down next week. But they were talking about very short lifespans of apartment complexes, which I thought just had some ramifications for what the town will look like in 35 years.
Yeah.
No, I think. Go ahead, Jim.
One thought on that is, you know, the town does have the rental license, you know, where if you're gonna rent a housing unit, you have to, you know, have it inspected. I think it's every other year or every third year. Even if it's to your son, you have to go through the bureaucracy.
You know, the Mansfield, we do have a little bit more power as our regulations have been refined over the years to enforce a requirement for maintenance. We have that for our stormwater systems now. And so that's something people have been very worried about, at least in terms of the engineered elements, ensuring that those do get taken care of. You know, one of the things that the town has always said in all the surveys that we've gotten back is everybody's highest priority is our open spaces. And so ensuring we don't have open space degradation as we build up around these critical habitat areas is I think something that's really critical for this committee to continue weighing in on. As we add a huge amount of housing to the north end of town, you know, there's the question of amenities and what kinds of open spaces people are going to have and the kinds of trails that we may wind up making. I continuously bite off more than I can chew in terms of the new projects I keep opening. But the idea of creating more walking trails to connect those various projects as they go in, the idea of creating dedicated hiking and open space, it's really important for the community. We're hearing that consistently. And I think it's one of those things that concerning housing that this body can really help with, coming up with ideas for where that should be, how it should look, advising and creating plans for it. Just some thoughts from me.
Yeah, I think Charlotte did have a good point there that one of the focuses of this was trying to tweak out what kind of regulatory changes could support the sentiments that were being addressed at the listening session. And what I'm hoping is that we see some interesting proposals for regulatory changes and enhancements that can try to implement some of those. One other thing that I heard was there's some concern about how things relate to UConn, both in terms of coordinating with what UConn's doing and how many of these people are actually going to be students anyway.
Yeah, it's after you.
Oh, I was just going to follow up on Ken's point because that came up in my group was who's living in all these units, and they were saying that the hope for downtown stores had been that there would be a mix of students, of retirees, of alumni, you know, coming back to live and work in the area. And that instead it's like 99.9% students. And how can the community encourage others, people who aren't students, to come and live in these different housing units?
One of the overwhelming things that we've heard from developers, so from developers who have an interest in selling it, so of course take it with a grain of salt, but one of the overwhelming things we've heard from developers is that they believe that they're responding to market pressures that are a demand for dedicated student housing because there's students in tons of single family homes, and it can be presumed that some of those are there because they want to be in single family homes. But it can also presume that some of them are there because there isn't enough housing at UConn and that the Oaks has become prohibitively expensive. You know, for when I first got to Mansfield, I, you know, for giggles, I looked at how much it would be to get a 2-bedroom apartment at the Oaks. You know, just it would be great to work across the street. And it was double what I was paying an hour away for a commensurate sized unit. So the idea being that with competition in the area, prices for these units come down, which makes them more attractive to everybody, which is good and may reduce the market force, which makes so many single family houses workable as rentals, such that some of them stop being rentals, not simply because students don't want to live in them, but because it no longer makes economic sense to rent them and buy them as rental properties. That is some of the economic calculus behind it. I'm not an economist, and I don't know how true that is.
Miranda, I think wants to join in.
I think we're going to be surprised how much students actually want the single family houses as opposed to living in these complexes. I think students don't want to feel like someone's looking over their shoulder. I think they've gotten used to having this, what they view as independence and freedom associated with living in a single family house. I'm not at all convinced that students are actually going to be able to fill these places that are coming in. I think that students are used to a different lifestyle now than what they're used to. They're not necessarily even looking for the dorm life once they've moved off campus. They're looking for something different. That's my thought number one. My thought number two is that the number one way that you pull other demographics into an apartment complex like this that is going to have a substantial portion of students is by keeping the students separate in their own section of it, because the people coming in with their families want to be with other families, not with students and their antics and lifestyles and everything all next door to them. I'm not speaking for myself. I'm just saying families want other kids around. People want to be with similar communities. And so one of the number one ways, and I don't think this is at all possible, but realistically that you would actually attract people to a place like this is by having set little sections of it where we said, hey, you know, like when I went to college, where they had different floors, different interests, things like that, where you said, look, we're going to try and fill this with people who are interested in this, who are at this stage in their life, who are doing, you build little pseudo communities, and that's what's going to pull people in. And that's my 2 cents worth.
Another observation I'll make is that when my son looked at the proposed floor plans for the Oaks, he zeroed right in on that the floor plans were targeted for congregate student living, not families. And some of it is if you're going to have ensuite bathrooms for every bedroom, that's not family.
I don't want to clean that many bathrooms. No, thank you.
Jennifer.
Evening. I was coming to talk about something else during the staff report, but I thought I would just chime in. You know, this multi-housing nut is pretty tough one to crack, because unlike, we can't dictate who lives in a house. So UConn or a college can say, you know, you like French, you like the cello, you know, let's have a learning community. We can't do that. The only thing we can do is have age restricted housing. That said, what we can do and what we're looking to do, and I'm really glad that we had so much input to this workshop, or to the work session earlier in the month. What we do now is we have we call it multi-generational housing. So there's a provision in the zoning regulations, starting with the standard at Four Corners, where a certain I don't have the zoning regs in front of me, but a certain percentage of the units have to have like a principal bedroom, one that is larger. You have to have an area that you can fit a dining table. Obviously, we can't make people have dining tables, but it has to be unlike the Oaks, where it's hard to fit a dining room table. There have to be a certain percent of units that have X amount of storage, X amount of count. I mean, these are pretty prescriptive regulations. We're trying to do that, but the bottom line is that when there's a market for this, it's going to be challenging. And one of the things that I think Mike D'Amato said it really well. You can look at density, we can look at things like landscaping, we can look at amenities. That's another thing that is part of that multi-generational housing provision, and is to look at the types of amenities that you're offering. They have to be family friendly. They can't be like, oozeball or it has to be other things beside that, other things. So we met with the regulatory review committee today. We're looking at all sorts of different things. And I do feel like it's interesting because the things that folks talked about weren't things I was necessarily, it's the things that the Planning and Zoning Commission has been trying to crack. It's just really hard. So keep talking, keep putting stuff out there. There's only so much we can do with zoning. We live in a capitalist society, and I wish we could kind of control it more, but it's the market is sort of dictates a lot. So we're trying.
So Jennifer, one of the things I noticed on that presentation was they had a lot of statistics about the percentage of single family, multifamily, et cetera, in town.
Mm-hmm.
But it was unclear whether that ignored Yukon or treated it as a black box or included Yukon in those percentages, which Yukon would radically change how those numbers are reported.
Yeah, we don't record the units on Yukon. Like we're not saying that we know that Yukon houses, it ranges, I think, between 60 and 70% of their students, which is high for their comparative universities, but that changes. We know that there's a waiting list for housing right now, that they can't house all of their students. We know from a survey that they did, that more students want to live on campus. We know that we tell developers every time we meet with them, where is the market for this? Because we're not quite sure about it. We know that in the Northwest Mansfield Vision and Strategy Plan, we've done a market analysis that agrees that there may not be a market for this. So we don't account for, because those are not units. That's not considered. So when they said a multifamily unit, it's not Yukon.
Yeah, but I guess the point is that we need to take into account what's happening on campus in making the decisions off campus, or else we're not working with a full deck.
Yeah, I'm going back 50 years, obviously, and I assume it hasn't changed. One of the real drivers as to whether you'd live off campus or in the dorm was the cost of the meal plan.
Yeah.
I
mean, UConn is studying this too. Believe me, they want their students to live on campus for a number of reasons, but one of them is financial, because they get a lot of money from this housing. That's one of, we understand it. We hear from, the administrators there that is their I think it's the biggest profit center. They're making money. It's from housing and the meal plan. So they want to see people live on campus as well. And they haven't updated their housing stock in many, many years. Dropping kids off at UConn not too long ago, you look at the housing stock and it's at a price point that will be competitive with what is going to come online in the private market. And it's not nearly as nice. I don't know if you saw the amenity presentation of the hub, but they're having hot tubs and fire pits on the roof. Downstairs is Ted's and Huskies. Yeah, the dorm is not going to be like that.
And the UConn amenities are right next door. So anything that the hub doesn't offer, you get as part of being a student.
Right. And I mean, whether we like the hub or not, I mean, the hub is, I think planning and zoning, I remember driving them around in the van, the Parks and Rec van, like 8 years ago when we started doing this, and we looked at every single multifamily, not every, but many multifamily apartment complexes. And we looked at the areas where multifamily would be appropriate. And they said King Hill was probably the best place for that because it's so close to campus. And it is, hopefully people won't need cars. And so and the developers said it's a private dorm. That was what they said when they had their public hearing. It's on the record.
Yeah. My daughter-in-law was associate vice president for student affairs at Purdue University in Indiana, which is a consortium in Indianapolis, and all their dorms were private dorms. No.
One thing that did come out of the housing meeting, though, was a concern that because the hub is private, not UConn, it could put an additional strain on the town police and fire resources, because there would be an expectation that they would be first responders, even though UConn is kind of right next door.
Well, there's some present there. St. Mark's and the rest of Church Row, with the exception of, I'm not sure, in the Muslim Center, are actually not UConn property. And yet UConn is our first responder, even though it's technically, non-UConn land.
Well, the UConn has made it pretty clear that the town is going to have to bear the responsibility for public safety at the hub. There obviously we have these mutual aid agreements, and we are going to be having a meeting with Hans Reinhardt, who is their director of safety. The chief of police and the chief of fire services reports to him, as well as with Tim Merrill, our fire folks. And so we're going to have to work these things out. There's going to be no doubt about it. So
in terms of
halfway through, because I was at a zoning board of appeals meeting. So I know Michael has been doing a great job, but if you have questions for me, I'm happy to take them.
One thing I think that this body can really do is in terms of providing recommendations for the types of amenities, and in the regulations reviewing to see if our multifamily regs, as they get revised over the course of the next couple months, are encouraging the kinds of developments that would provide for open spaces and amenities to provide living space for elderly folks and families. If you can weigh in on that, I think that's a place where you have some real expertise that we would really be appreciative. So as soon as, I think in about a month, the reg review committee is supposed to get a first draft of some multifamily regs.
Yeah.
I would love, after our reg review meeting, to pass those along to you all such that you can give me your thoughts, go back over things like our subdivision regs and our existing regs on amenities and provide some insights on that. That would be really helpful. I know I'm asking you to read zoning regs, which is always riveting. But the next time you get stuck at an airport in some transit flight, it's just some light reading that'll keep people away from you.
Or troubled by insomnia.
Exactly. 6 of 1, really.
One thing I wanted to say is about the Northwest Mansfield Vision and Strategy Plan. I think, that basically is turning out to be like a mini POCD for that Northwest portion of Mansfield. And some of the things that we're looking at or is coming out of that, as we work with FHI, the group that's doing that plan, is that we got to look at this from not just zoning, but also, we're going to have to look at, how do we connect? The connectivity is like one of the major things that came out of the workshop on January 4th. People want to see these connected spaces. They want to have, when they walk on a sidewalk, they want it to be a pleasant experience. So the town is going to have to kind of think about, we want to encourage more people to walk. We want to encourage neighborhoods. We want to encourage, streets that make it comfortable for people to not just drive their car. So that's going to be one thing. Looking at, the park network and kind of talking about the trails and making sure that we connect that. And, there's going to be open space in terms of the conservation easements, and then the land behind 497 Middle Turnpike, and then looking at other open space to see if we can get some sort of park and some kind of positive use, and then thinking about what we're going to do with Goodwin, which is, it's vacant right now and it's municipal land. And so I think those are all the recommendations that are going to come out, and that will be, there will be an opportunity for folks to provide more opportunities. There's been surveys and 2 public meetings, and lots of interviews with different folks from the neighborhood, from all sorts of different people. So,
Well, you're going to make it a nature center for Sue, right?
yeah, sure.
Bring me the plans, Sue. Bring me the
Right.
plans. I'm applying for a lot of grants this year already. Let's add another one to the pile.
I would like to offer one concept that is triggered in part by the discussion we've had earlier here, is a lot of the amenities on these new developments are not publicly owned. They're part of the developer's package. And we've heard people express concern about maintenance and care on a for-profit thing. And maybe one of the things that these regulations ought to look at is if these amenities are a key to approval of the package, maybe there needs to be some financial assurances that they don't lapse the way we have neighborhood associations decide to take and manage the liability.
I think we lost part of you, Ken. You're last after they
Yeah.
don't lapse. Yeah, we're already I'll look to Michael and Jennifer, but aren't we already starting to do that for drainage and stuff? In developments, requiring assurances.
Yes. Yes, and like, for example, they have to monitor their stormwater management system to make sure that it's running as planned. And then on the most recent development, Land Tech, our peer review consultant, suggested that we start filing these stormwater management plans on the land record, so that it goes, that it's very, very clear what you have to do to maintain these stormwater management systems that are, engineered systems.
We need to look at the amenities as being equally needing T's.
Ken, there's something wrong with your microphone. You're kind of all
Very tinny.
Yeah.
Is this
No.
sorry about that?
Now you're actively muted, Ken. There we go.
Is it any better now?
No.
While we're waiting for Ken, you mentioned a marketing study, and I would be interested in seeing the results of that study. I think that would help us to understand what the developers might be aiming for, and therefore what amenities we might want to recommend for the types of residents that might show up. So I'd appreciate seeing that.
Yeah, that it's going to be part of that plan that's going to come out soon. So yes, and we will get that out to folks.
Okay, part of what plan?
The Northwest Mansfield Vision and Strategy.
Oh, okay.
That's like it was one of the items that the consultants did as part or are doing as part of that. So I was going to say one other thing, and of course it's really hard when you talk to a developer. I can't tell you how many times I said, well, what about age restricted housing? Because that is something you can do. And even just a portion of having a portion of one of these complexes as age restricted would automatically diversify the population. So you're going to get kind of like what Miranda is hopefully suggesting. And that's the only way you can kind of restrict it. I mean, you can tell them to build a dining room that will fit a table and add kitchen countertops and have a principal bedroom, but students can still live in there. And, so.
What was their response when you suggested that?
Oh, I suggested every time, and it's blank. There apparently is no market. I suggest small single family. I suggest like cottage style developments. I suggest partially age restricted. I suggest one of my favorite things is single families with automatic accessory dwelling units, because in the zoning regulations, either the primary or the accessory dwelling has to be owner occupied. So I thought that would be a way to kind of stabilize it, because at least it's owner occupied, and that we generally, I mean, you never know, but it is one kind of thing that we can do. But there just doesn't seem to be that. It's not the market. I don't.
Well,
I'm
students
not
pay more.
sure. Yeah, it's
Captive audience.
right.
Now, for the record, I realized that really wasn't a realistic possibility, and that you probably had done
I
everything.
know. I wish,
Those
it's hard. This is a tough nut. I was wondering, Mr. Chair, if there should be something on the agenda for like a staff report, and I just wanted to kind of brief the committee on something. Would it be okay if I?
Yeah, if the committee has no objection, why don't we let Jennifer give us a briefing?
So I just wanted to just kind of let you know, I did speak with Vicki a little bit about this, but this is something that I was not involved with in the early stages, but I just became aware of it, and I thought this committee would probably want to provide just be aware of it and see about providing input. So basically, as part of the American Rescue Plan Act funds, the town council back in 22, they allocated $75,000 for public art. And I think that was actually a provision in ARPA that you had to give some of the money to art. So that's how the council decided to do that. And then in early spring of 23, there were some requests for concepts that were distributed, and a working group composed of 2 local artists, the director of Parks and Rec, the recreation coordinator who staffs the Arts Advisory Committee, and the executive director of the Downtown Partnership. They evaluated these concepts. 3 concepts from the different artists were chosen, and it was determined that creating sort of this art walk from Route 195 along 89 to the elementary school was the most appropriate place. So the concepts that this working group approved was a garden, a sculpture, and a drawing, and that the location for that is at the public library. And then the second is it's a series of customized street signs and that combines symbols of local wildlife with aspirational words celebrating Mansfield's noteworthy growth and synergetic blend of nature and modern life. And that's going to be located along the sidewalk that was built through Safe Routes of School money, that begins at 195 and travels along 89. And then the last concept that they approved was a mural. So the Mansfield, we have an arts advisory committee. For those of you who don't know, they reviewed these proposals and they supported the working group's choice. And the reason why I'm coming to you is that this art walk is going to be bookended by 2 kiosks that were funded through that Connecticut Forest and Parks Trail that Michael's been working on, that he'll probably describe to you a little bit later on tonight. That are we got money from Connecticut Forest and Parks Association through the Recreation Trails Program grant to kind of improve public access and understanding of all of this amazing trail network that we have in Mansfield Center. So we're working with the group that, or we're hoping to work. We have not hired anyone yet, and we have not designed anything yet. We know we need to spend this money with the group that did the sign at Bicentennial Pond for the Universal Access Trail. And if you recall, there's like the overall parks map is on one side, and then they kind of zoom into Bicentennial Pond, and they talk about the different trails, not only the Universal Access Trail, but how to connect within Bicentennial Pond. So the artists, the way this works, it's a different process than I've ever participated in, but according to the working group, the next step is for the artists to develop these more detailed concepts. So they have these like high level concepts that were approved by this working group. And so what I'd like to do is, and I've suggested, is that so that the artists can obtain a better understanding of the natural and historic features of the area, that this committee, along with the Historic District Commission, go on, just take a walk and kind of talk about these areas, learn from the artists about what they're doing, provide feedback. I've kind of, I'm slowing this project down a little bit by kind of interjecting myself, but I do think this is important. And if there were further feedback, you could provide it, but within a couple of weeks after that site walk. And they're looking, we have to coordinate with the new librarian, with the principal, with this committee, Historic District Commission, and the artists, so that they can be there. And so we're looking to schedule something either on February 6th or February 8th at 3 p.m. So it will be a publicly noticed meeting. Cynthia Van Zelm is going to be doing the coordinating of it. And so I know not the whole committee, I'm sure, will not be able to be there, but I'm hoping that we get at least a few core members so that you can give these folks some feedback. It is public art. Not everyone's going to love it, but we just want to make sure that people are excited. I mean, it is interesting that we're putting money towards public art, and it will, given the fact that we are getting a crosswalk and some lighting, and kind of highlighting where the Nipmuc Trail comes out by Southeast School, and then bringing people who have access to public transportation to Mansfield Hollow. I do think it can add to this. It's just, I do want these artists to have the benefit of your background, institutional knowledge, and expertise.
The other group, when you mentioned the library, Joshua's Trust is a major public use player in that area with their Buchanan Woods and so forth behind the library.
Yeah, I could reach out to Michael Veeam to see if he or someone from AT would like to be there. So that's just what I came to talk about. I don't know if anyone has questions, but just kind of stay tuned, and we'll get more information out. And this train is sort of already it's on its way, but I think with the right feedback and input, this could all be kind of cool and come together and really highlight not only the natural resources, but also like some of the cultural and historic resources along that corridor, so that we get more people walking, using that, going to the library, going to the trails, going, from the bus to Mansell House State Park, theoretically.
I'm surprised you have signs that won't fit the branding protocol.
Well, that's we'll see, right? Well, I mean,
Thank
I
God,
don't.
Ken.
Yeah. So that's all I have and I'm sure Michael has a whole bunch of other stuff. So, and I know in the interest of time, I'll let you guys get back to your meeting, if that's okay. Thank you for letting me kind of interrupt.
Well, thank you for sharing.
I had a quick question,
That's-
Jennifer. What's this age thing that you mentioned?
For housing?
Yeah.
So like, there's these 55 and older communities.
Mhm.
And so I think per the Fair Housing Act, that's the only thing that you can say, all right, this is going to be for people 55 and older. You can't say, no students, but you can say, we're going to restrict this. And you can actually just say, I want 30% of this development to be designated for 55 and older. So you can do that you can restrict things for affordable housing, like income, and then age. But other than that, that's really all you can do, except for try to build it in a form that a certain population is attractive to a certain population. But that's kind of challenging too.
Thanks.
All right. Well, it's really nice to see you guys. I miss you.
Yeah.
And have a good one.
Thanks for hopping on, Jen.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Mhm. Okay. Have we finished? I got the feeling we were finished with the housing roundtable. So that brings us to some updates from Michael.
Yes, I have some upcoming projects. So as referenced before, I have decided, kind of accidentally, to be very ambitious with projects this year, because I have no sense of when I've bitten off too much. So I've lined up a whole bunch of stuff that I'm intending to do at the various parks with our existing budget, both for the current year and then this coming year. And I just want to let you know about some of them. Several of them are grant funded or related to invasive species control. We're going to start with the one that isn't at all, and that is a dredge. So dredging is always somewhat controversial, but the director of Parks and Rec and I, Jay, we've been discussing a potential dredge at Bicentennial Pond. So Bicentennial Pond, based on our oldest records, used to hold about 3 times as much water as it does now. The northern acre of the pond has filled in pretty drastically and is 1 foot or 2 feet deep in a lot of places now, which is really inhibiting the ability of that pond to be useful for recreation, right? This is an artificial pond. It's an impoundment of our natural streams that was created for human recreation. And so we are starting to risk losing it as an amenity. There are other areas of the pond which are potentially also filling in around our swim platform. And we've got a lot of invasive species in there, and a lot of over-vegetation in terms of what we've got growing from the bottom muck. So we are in the early phases of getting some preliminary quotes on what it looks like, the amount of material that we would be pulling out there would be, what it would involve. This may not be a this year project. This may be a we need to sequester money for 3 years project, because a dredge is very expensive. It could be a 6-figure project, but the goal is to put away money until we can afford to do this. We had a 2018 management plan come through for the pond with suggested that we may want to dredge. Now we are continuing, now that COVID is over and we're starting to resume reality, we're starting to execute on the idea that, yeah, we probably do want to dredge. Let's figure out the actual logistics of doing so. The only complicated part of this, at least in terms of, there's various water course and permitting things that I would have to take care of in my office, is the fact that the debris that is taken out, the dredging material has to drain somewhere, and in order to become light enough that it's possible to transport. And that means it's probably going to have to drain on site. So this dredge is going to be something that we're going to do at the end of October. We're going to have to cordon off part of the park in order to make sure people don't go onto it, because although we don't anticipate large amounts of contaminated material to come out of this, anytime you dredge up a large pond, there's always the risk of chemicals that we don't want on people's feet. So as I get closer to the end goal with this project, I may be coming in to let you all know about this area of the park is going to need to be cordoned off at these times. We'll have environmental reports, which I'll come to you with, and I'll look for your recommendations on, should we place it anywhere else? Should we go full scope, partial scope? So Jay and I are both going to be looking forward this to you. This is just kind of a heads up that we're at the beginnings of investigating this.
Yeah. If you go into Google Maps and turn on, I think they call it aerial or satellite view or whatever, you can actually see the siltation in the pond. And the other thing that I would think there'd want to be some kind of siltation control down there. And I'll share with Michael something I learned about a week ago from Diane Josie, who's pesticide management from DEEP, that they are putting in for a general permit for aquatics, as opposed to you have to go through their specific permitting for each application.
That's going to be good to know. Yeah, one of the things that we noted when we were discussing with Neer, who is our aquatic consultant, was that any project like this would probably be best served by having an upstream watershed study to see if there are any point sources of erosion where we might be able to do some, I'm not going to say quick and easy, but quickish and easy-ish solutions of hardening some sort of area where we're having a lot of dirt loss, or putting in some sort of a catch basin somewhere where we're getting a lot of sweep down potentially off agricultural land. So it's in order to preserve BCP as a resource in the long run, and I know it's one of our major parks that people are really, really attached to and provide some great resources for our community. It looks like this is going to be a big expenditure down the road. So if you have recommendations, please send them to me, because I want to get this proposal right as we start moving forward.
Michael,
Dredging. Oh, go ahead, Ken.
yeah, two things that to consider is there are some various higher tech approaches that you can dewater with more money but less footprint.
Mm-hmm.
But you also want to have a really good idea of what's in that dredge material, because if you have certain chemicals that are, and the list is getting longer every time we discover new chemicals that are problems, disposal can get extremely expensive. And you need to have an idea what's in there before it comes out of the pond.
Yeah, we're going to have to do a licensed environmental professional, have them take some samples in order to run the full spectrum of heavy metals and organic toxins and things like that. So, which is why when I told Jay this was a 6-figure project, he almost couldn't believe it, but there's a lot to go on with it. So
in dredging through old materials, which Jim and I have been doing, I think it was RC&D did a watershed study of the watershed for Bicentennial Pond that might be useful.
Be great to have as a baseline.
I'm pretty sure it's in the materials in the town clerk's office. And
in the big pile marked with Michael?
No, I think it's in the Schoolhouse Brook Park file.
Okay.
But we can dig it out for you.
I would never say no to that.
Okay.
I suspect the focus of that was on origins for bacterial contamination that caused swimming closures.
Yeah.
So that's the dredge. A smaller project, which I expect to actually happen relatively quickly, is at Dunham Town Forest. So as you all probably remember, when we had to work with the White Oak Apartments per the deep order to create the leaching field for the septic repair at White Oak, there was a lot of wear and tear on the parking lot. So now that we're 6 to 8 months past the end of that project, we are seeing that the parking lot's experiencing a good amount of erosion right now. We've had a lot of knotweed come in and populate the western side of that parking lot. And so what we want to do is we want to put down crushed stone on the downslope side of the parking lot, such that it's going to stabilize where we're currently having erosion loss to. That's going to provide a better parking area there, as well as we want to pull out that knotweed, go for the roots with some till, and then close application of weed killer. Targeted, explicitly we're doing a targeted herbicide here, because we don't want to do broad spectrum or general spray too close to the wetland, but we want to get that knotweed out, improve that parking lot. I've got a quote on my desk for, I think it's $7,000 right now to come in and do that before the growing season really gets underway. And I have a meeting with Jay next week to consider allocating those funds. I wanted to tell you all about it, see if anyone has any recommendations. It's not the end of our work at Dunham Town Forest. We've got more to do with restricting access via mopeds and improving that field. But we think this is a good time to kill those invasives and stop the erosion.
Okay, good luck.
I may be
I was
getting
going to say,
deaf,
all I
but
can
did I hear
say
the word-
is good luck with the
Yeah.
knotweed.
Did
I
I hear
like-
the word till?
So we're gonna try to rip out the roots. So the idea
Yeah, I
is
guess
you do.
my experience with knotweed is it's got little nodes in the rhizomes, and
Yep.
each one of those can make a new plant, even when it's broken off. So any breaking up of the roots would just be basically planting new plants. The other thing is that those rhizomes can go 60 feet. And when you start messing with one area, you need to look in a 60-foot radius, because they will be stimulated to pop up at the end of the rhizomes, and you might have a much bigger work area than you had imagined you were going to have.
The experiment, Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station, does have a publication on knotweed control.
I'm sure that so we're likely going to use, since Earth Dynamics has been so familiar with the site, having done the work of the septic repair, we're thinking we'll use them. I know they've done invasive removal and control before. I'm sure we'll have some discussions about the difficulties of permanently extirpating knotweed.
There's also the issue of follow-up, and when you make a contract, it's important to recognize they need to come back and look and then deal with what they find, and that's over a period of several years. Even when you use herbicides, there's going to be some residual, and okay, we got 98% of it. Well, that's great, but in 10 years you'll have twice as much.
Yeah, it's back again.
Yeah, so it's pretty important to make sure that follow-up's part of the contract.
Yep, we're going to stay on it.
Plan.
We're gonna stay on it. Dunham Town Forest is it's a pet project of mine, because we've got kind of this chance to reimagine it as whatever we want it to be. Now this area has opened up. It is an ongoing, evolving project, so I will stay on it. But in terms of other invasives that we're also optimistic about, even though we know we're fighting a little bit like Sisyphus here, there's the aquatic invasives troll at Eagleville Lake. So this is one we're putting in a grant for with the state. We've done a study in the past about what's going on with aquatic invasives. Fanwort is the big one that we're dealing with in the lake, but we've also found that water chestnut has started to establish here. It's nowhere near as bad as water chestnut is in Hanson's Pond over on the east side of town, where it covers basically the entire surface of the pond. But we're hoping we can avoid that by doing some proactive hand pulling now. I know, good luck. I can read your lips, Tom. We love invasive control. The state has money for us to go after this. And so we're applying for a grant. I'm working on it right now. The town council authorized me to put it in for 2 years of monitoring, finding the best times to target fanwort based on propagation, sprays for fanwort, and hand removal for water chestnut, as well as an upstream watershed study to determine are there point sources where these things are coming from. The problem being that Eagleville Lake is an impoundment of the Willimantic River. So it's getting the entire Willimantic River basin above it. So it's very hard to actually, eliminate things. Our management plan currently acknowledges that we're probably never going to eliminate these kinds of invasives. It's pretty much impossible to do that once they reach this phase. But what we can do is we can maintain the recreational value that we find on the lake and make sure it's nice for people who live around it and use it as a regular resource. So we're hoping to continue our targeted herbicide applications as well as expand to control water chestnut before it takes over this pond.
The first fanwort control there was in conjunction with Coventry.
Yes.
Is this project also involving them?
Yes, we are still working with Coventry. The thing is that I'm taking over as the principal grant writer for this one because I am less new than their director of planning. Eric Trott, who was there for over 20 years, has retired and went to go work for the state doing something else. So Jaina, who is the new Coventry director of planning, has been there for a whopping 3 months and is still getting her feet under her a bit. So yeah. I volunteered like a good soldier to be the grant writer for this one. So that one, the application is nearing close. We're getting close to completion on it. And if you want to go look at the materials we're submitting, that's all part of the town council agenda from last night, which I presented to them, and I can also send it out to you. But those are kinds of the projects that we are looking at, as well as I think I mentioned back in September, the Dunham Town Forest, the timber harvest and salvage that we're intending to do to try to blunt emerald ash borer's effect on our woods. So yeah. Just a couple things in the pipeline.
I wanted to back up quickly, Michael, for your information on Dunham Town Forest. I hold the right-of-way pesticide supervisor's license, which is the one that's been rolled invasive control is under.
Okay.
Yeah, just file it in the back of your head.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
I will file that away. That's everything I have that's related to our parks. And if anyone has any questions or wants to make any recommendations for these projects, please just let me know. Otherwise, I'll stop talking now.
So there wasn't much in communications in our packet, so that brings us to reports from members. I don't know. Okay. She has one. So
he's directing. Okay. We've got a couple of different parks that we had comments, questions, or suggestions on, starting with Merrow. As you know, we go to Merrow really regularly. We have been right up till the snow fell, and just a few things that if you don't go there regularly, you might not be aware of. We have had, just because of all the rain things going on, parts of Merrow have been underwater. We've had at least 3 over the bank episodes in the past couple of months, which have done some really interesting things to the landscape because they've really scoured it down to dirt. So all of the leaves and anything that was on the ground have all been nicely washed away. It looks like it's been scrubbed. It's quite neat. Not that there's anything that we can or want to do about it, but I just thought it'd be interesting for people to know that we are underwater there. We've been underwater
Quite a bit.
on the edge along the river at least 3 times in the past couple of months. I haven't seen any sign of overall mowing yet this year. And at some point, we really need to sit down and clear up the mowing schedule and the mowing areas for Merrow, because they're mowing it further and further back from the path, which kind of defeats the purpose of having a path through the meadow. Because the handicapped people that want to go through the meadow and look at the vegetation is now about 12 feet from the path, where it used to be about 3 feet from the path. So we've got people that we know of that go through there with walkers, that go through there with wheelchairs, and the plants and the creatures that they want to look at on the plants are now nowhere near the path. Through a good portion of it. So we need to get not only the annual mowing schedule down, but also the mowing that they do during the summer. From the time the trail was put in until the past 2 years, they've mowed about 1 lawnmower's width from the trail, and now they're going 12, 15 feet away. So anyway, we need to play around with that. We still don't have the bench replaced, which they said they were going to be doing. We also we've been talking about it off and on, but I'm wondering what we could do about maybe seeing if they could plow the paved part of that path in the winter, because I think it's our most heavily used park, especially if you look at it year round. And Tom was there yesterday. Yeah. We had a with all the between the bridge, which is tipped up and was a glare of ice, and it has no railing or anything. So if anybody slipped, they would be taking a little dive into the marsh. And where people still walk on it when the snow comes, and then it ices over and becomes really like a little skating rink. But the people are still walking on it. And when I say people, I don't think that we have ever been there when there wasn't at least 1 car, and there's usually more like 6 or 7 cars. There's somebody on the trail all the time.
Even when it's flooded.
Yeah. Yeah.
They closed the gate, and there were 3 cars parked in the little area to the gate, and they went in and they walked through it. The other thing, even getting sand or salt around the inner trail would be good.
Yeah, because it's
way too icy.
Yeah, it's very dangerous, and they're still going on it every day. So anyway, that's kind of what we were thinking about with Merrow. We did Bicentennial Pond again after all the rains, and there's a couple of places there that the erosion has kind of washed all the dust that they put down away, and it's getting a little more rocky and ruddy. That would be difficult probably to get a wheelchair through. So I don't know. Is the company that originally did that still coming back and checking it, or
I think that's us.
Would that be something Public Works would have to do?
What do you say?
I think that's us.
Okay.
I think that's us. So we've just got the rains have hammered us. The rain and the snow,
I know,
and the rain
I
and the
know.
snow and the ice.
Yeah.
It's down
I mean,
on-
it may be something we have to wait till spring to do anything about, but we just want to make a note that it's really held up well over the years since it was put in, but this last round of rain has really chewed it up in a couple of places.
There's just 2 or 3 places that would need to be fixed after a big rain.
And the third one was we haven't gotten together since Walktober, and one of our Walktober walks was 50 foot. And we had a really good turnout, but we had a couple of older folks, my category, that weren't as ambulatory as others, that the place where the trail used to go down the wood road that's now kind of all eroded out, that area, it was really kind of difficult for some of them to navigate. And we had talked one time about just forgetting that as the trail and trying to do a trail down through the woods, but we were discussing whether that would be something that we would do or whether we should try to get the Blue Trail people, because that is also Blue Trail. So we might want to, I don't know, talk to trying to remember his name.
The other thing is where most of that route from the historical society to the cliff is on old roads. Is it when I was walking, I was wondering if it made sense to stabilize that section of road.
Well, there's one, the steepest part of it is completely eroded out so that it's just the big rocks. And so the people were either having to walk on the bank where there really isn't a defined trail, or sort of stumbling and tripping down over the rocks, especially this year, the rocks plus the acorns.
The problem is when people start walking on the side, you keep widening your trail and impacting.
Well, I'm thinking of just not using the road down that steep section and building a trail, far enough away from it so it's not like right on the bank of it, down through the woods in a place where it's not going to erode away. I think that would be doable, just looking at what the land looks like, but I don't know whether it would be our responsibility or whether that would be something that the Blue Trail people would want to do.
Yeah.
And I have another outrageous idea. And you know how outrageous my ideas can be, but maybe we could work together.
Anyway, I say that there was a couple of people that just had a real hard time getting down through there.
I remember many years ago, I'm not sure when it was, we actually did look at an alternative trail to the right, and avoiding that whole section. And it's quite doable. I mean,
that's what I thought, just looking at it.
We actually flagged it and nothing came of it, but it was definitely doable, and you could get down to the bottom and come back to the wood road where it was more level. So doable.
What's your feeling on it, Vicky? Would that be something that the Blue Trail people would want to do, or is that something we should be looking at doing ourselves?
Well, I think definitely have to talk with them, because it is their trail, and they might be happy to do it. I think it's just talking with them and saying, here's the problem and what can we all do about this?
Yeah, because John Hankins is pretty easy to work with, although he is president of Joshua's Trust, so he's spread pretty thin.
Okay, maybe that's something we when the spring rolls around, maybe we should chat with them about it. Also, when we went down there, this is the first time I've ever seen the big bridge down at the bottom, kind of the water lapping along the edge of it. That's how much water we've had.
It needs work.
Because it looks like it's been wet for months, and there were some of the boards that were a little on the squishy side. So anyway, those are the park things that we've been noticing out while we're out roaming around.
Okay, so I've got those down and my list of things to tackle and hopefully deal with the
I don't know. I mean, we've been talking about the mowing thing at Merrow for a couple of years, and supposedly the message, and this is even before you were here, Michael, that there was supposed to be messages that went to the Public Works crew, but evidently the messages never got to the people that were actually running the mowing machines. So it's,
Yeah, I'm hoping what I'll be able to do is this year before the spring is to just sit down with Will, who's the guy who runs the grounds crew, and maybe like his head grounds crew guys, just to get the word out of like, we go to the site, we look at where it is, we figure out the small path, and then we say, and mark this out and don't cut anything else on the sides
yeah,
of it.
that
Just to
would
do
be,
that early this season.
yeah, I also I have some slides of what it was like this summer if they want to see what we don't want.
Yeah, please send me a picture.
Yeah.
That's always useful.
Yep.
I'm wondering what the protocol is when we have down trees and things on over our trails and things like that. I know from walking around a little bit, especially with all the rain and the weather that we've had, that I think we're going to discover a lot of that as we start to reuse and open up trails this spring more than usual. I know there are some in the trails near my house. I was at Wolf Rock a couple weeks ago, and I think there might have been something down there too, but I don't remember anymore, I'll be honest.
Yeah, the procedure normally is you call me and then I go bug the Public Works department to deal with
Okay.
it. And I remind them until I stop getting the reports. They're normally pretty good, except for the fact when you need to have your equipment in and the ground is soup, as it has been lately.
Yeah, what I've seen would be just chainsaw work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, there is the fact that technically, for liability reasons, the town cannot endorse nor train anyone to carry a chainsaw on trails and remove obstructions. However, if we are completely unaware of such things, we can do nothing about it. This
Right.
is what I have heard from people who I can neither confirm nor deny carry chainsaws along our trails.
This awareness
So-
has not escaped me.
Yes, it is something that we are simultaneously aware of and not aware of. They have no association with the town, and you know, I know a couple folks who work with Josh's
Elves.
trust. Yeah, I thought they were more about tree protection than cutting them down, but I suppose it's all forest health, right? So, anyway, if you see them down, let me know, and I'll see if I can get Public Works on them.
I think there's going to be a lot of it coming up.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sure. And if you have pictures or like if you particularly have an iPhone, if you can send me the geotag, that's really helpful.
Right back.
If you don't have an iPhone, that's fine. Just send me the picture and describe roughly where it is.
Under a rock.
Under a rock. Thank you. Nowhere else in Mansfield is like that.
Go on. You can do it with a little bit of difficulty with your Android phone.
Yes, I can do it with my Android phone. I'm just
Yes.
teasing.
Yeah, but make sure the rock isn't indigenous structures.
Yeah.
So I think Vicky, you had a couple of things.
Well, I have one thing and half of a thing, and you have one thing. Jim has one
yeah.
thing. I have been working on a history of the Open Space Preservation Project for several years now, off and on, mostly off, but I finally finished it last spring and pretty much set it aside so that Jim and I could work on the files in the town clerk's office, because that involved not only going through everything, trying to get rid of as much as we could, we actually had an empty box celebration. We actually achieved an empty box, and the town clerk was thrilled. Anyway, so I set the report aside so that Jim and I could work on this, because these files have a lot of letters, town council decisions, etc. And a person wanting to know about an acquisition would have to page through all of this and not necessarily figure out exactly what happened. So for each of these properties, and there are, I think, like 40 files there, I created a summary. which I think Jim sent you a sample of the summary for
Yeah.
Schoolhouse Brook
Yeah,
Park.
I shared them out in an individual email
Right.
to you people.
And so for each parcel that was acquired, I would write a summary of sort of how and why it was acquired. And Jim created a map that was numbered. So the number of the parcel in the summary matches the number on the map. So if someone is coming to look at a particular property, they have this summary and map right at the beginning. So then they have an overview. And then if they want to paw through the myriad documents that are there, they have some overview of and can figure out how these documents fit in with that overview. Anyway, we finished that around Thanksgiving time. So I came back to the open space history and had a New Year's resolution that I was going to have it finished by New Year's. And I made it, which I'm really happy about. So I have given it to Jim. He sent it out to all of you. This is something that I did for several reasons. One was that the Open Space Committee was coming to an end, and most of the big projects that we were working on were coming to an end. The committee started in '88 and ended in 2018. So it was 30 years. Jim was there, I think, for all of it. I was there for about 27 of the years. And I wanted to record sort of what we had done because we knew what we did, why we did it, and this institutional knowledge was going to disappear when Jim and I stopped working on the committee. So I thought I had a sense of responsibility for doing this, but I also was motivated because I have many boxes in my basement with files. I would like to get rid of them. And I thought that if I did this report, I could get rid of them and not feel guilty about it. So I actually had two motivations for doing this. I enjoyed doing it. I had a lot of great help. Jim looked at it. Ken and Charlotte both made a lot of really helpful comments. At this point, it is a draft. I have pretty much done what I want to do with it. But if you all have suggestions, I am totally open to suggestions for the actual text. The other part of this is, okay, now what happens with this? One thing I do know is happening is that the Historical Society would like a copy, so we can handle that. But the question is, who else might use this? And if so, where would it be available for them? In what format? And I'm hoping that the committee can make some suggestions about the distribution.
Well, having spent some time reading it, I think that anybody who's on any town committee ought to read it. And if, it's not like they need to read every detail, but just to get the sense of history, get the sense of the timing, and also get the sense of the importance of the work that's been done in this town. It's actually pretty impressive what the town has accomplished over the years.
I think that my link to the material that was sent to me has expired. So it's telling me I cannot look at it now.
Okay.
But Tom's saying he'll get it to me, so that's good.
Yeah, I can I can create another link and
I
send
have
it.
looked at it, but I can't get back to it.
Yeah.
One thing that I think could be a great way for us to push this project forward and kind of distribute it is at our March meeting to come back with comments and any revisions or suggestions or linked material we would want to add as appendices at the end. And then produce a document, maybe by the end of the March meeting, that we were all in support of, that could be forwarded to we could forward it to the Planning and Zoning Commission to be, part of the guiding documents for the POCD, which we have to go out to bid for again. But we could try to get that integrated into the POCD, the history, or we could just put it up on the website and distribute it to everybody. would everyone's preference be? Because I haven't had a chance to finish reading it yet, but it's really great so far from what I've gotten into.
A lot of great things happened. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that once we get a finished document, putting it on the website, where we have all the maps and things as another document that goes with the Schoolhouse Brook part of that. We run into people all the time at Marrow and talk to them about, you know, did you know that there's a website that, and I'm always surprised at how many people do go on and have downloaded maps and have looked at things. I've had families say that they've used my my family activity guide. So I know people go on the site, especially new people. We had a really fun family that moved to Mansfield from California that did several of our walks over the past couple of years, and they've read everything on that site. They've looked at all the maps. They looked at all the, I mean, they're outdoors people, but it does get used. And if there's somebody that's interested in the history of the parks, they would go look at it, I think. So I think that's a really good place to put it.
Well, I have to also think that there must be some place to record the history of municipal committees that as part of the town history, not just the historical society, but the
Right.
official town records.
Yeah.
Well, the minutes are in the town clerk's office, and so they're accessible. At the moment, they are, I think, all paper, but I know the town clerk is working on digitizing a lot of the material. So eventually those may be digitized and be available on the website. Yes, and to me, this is, you know, for example, there are trail guides, and that's like an immediate need. Somebody wants to go for a walk, they get a trail guide, they go for a walk.
Yeah.
This is not this is not the same thing. This is an historical document. It's so I'm just asking myself, is there a place on the website for historical material? Not just, you know, what I've done, but other historical material as well. You know, the way the town used to look 50 years ago, that sort of thing, or
5 years ago.
or 5 years ago, whatever.
We have 5 years. We do have aerial photography for 5 years. I can say that.
Right, but to me, that's a larger question. You know, do we want to have an historical part of the town website? And that's not something we can decide. I think that's, you know, the town council has to decide that, or planning has to decide that, whatever.
Yeah.
Do any of the statewide agencies like Connecticut Forest and Parks, do they collect that kind of history?
The Connecticut Land Conservation League, all the land trust consortium, if you would, are starting to build a reference section.
Okay.
And Mansfield was a real leader in terms of municipal land preservation. And I'm elated to say that a lot of people have caught up and maybe even surpassed us.
Yep.
But that's a good thing because it means more people are working on protecting natural resources. On that same line, in going through these the records, we've created a pile that's probably creeping up on 1.5 feet high of things relating to various management plans. the only sort that was done is we were sticking sticky notes in so we could, you know, each time for the sections for different properties in the stack. One of my plans is at some point to start to sort through these and then try to merge them into the management plan books if the things that are missing. Some of them seem to be like early drafts. But there's some inventories and so forth that are you know, probably useful to store with the management plans. And then try to figure out where the best place to store all those management plans are so they can be referenced in as working documents.
I will, one of my many goals is to update our management plans for all the parks. So that I will love to have access to those materials for reference of what we've already had in the past, things we've already considered.
You know, and the other thing is I've been thinking for a long time that we really need to work on our assorted trail guides. You know, because they were state of the art when they were done a couple of decades ago.
Yeah, I've been talking with Joshua's Trust about trying to get a lot of our plans into the same rough format as their plans, the way they produce right now, their general management guides, such that we can kind of have a common template for all of them as we move forward. And
well, in many places we're at least abutters.
Yeah.
So there should be a commonality in planning for the resource management. Ken, did on that, do you have any comments on your northwest corner?
Let me know if the audio is too rugged. I really don't have a lot of notes that I could find. A lot of the themes were they really want not a lot of big housing in the neighborhood, and a lot of talk about open space and accessibility and connectiveness. Some of the themes that we've been wrestling with for years.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like we're going to have a mini plan of conservation and development draft to review shortly. What Michael was saying, so we'll pull that whole thing together. Yeah, it's definitely a changing section of town.
And I think one of the things that's even an issue is exactly what should be the boundaries of this.
Yeah, because the economic development zone, or whatever it's called, includes things like Ridge Drive and so forth off of Separatists, which is an established neighborhood.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the problem with this is there's a wide diversity in the nature of the individual neighborhoods. And the plan is going to have to be multifaceted to address some of the smaller neighborhoods, the older residential neighborhoods, and also what's happening at Four Corners.
Yeah, and then we have in that general area, we also have the state is planning on moving Wyndham Tech there. So there's also going to be a high school.
Would that be the old prison location?
That's my understanding. I haven't seen much been aware of much progress happening on it.
We'll definitely have to take that into account
Yeah,
with the plan.
yeah. See, and that makes sense from the state's perspective. That land is unused. Although I proposed it for freshman men's dorms, without
Yeah, the
renovation.
fence would be helpful.
But it frees up a lot of space. It frees up an area around Eastern. Our oldest Eastern graduation was at Wyndham Tech Sports Field. Did we leave anything else? And so that brings us to probably the most important bureaucratic piece of our agenda is our scheduling our meetings officially.
Yes, as your resident bureaucrat, the fact that we did not meet after September last year meant that our meeting schedule got a little bit messy, and then there was the need to push this meeting a week, so it didn't coincide with the pushed meeting for planning and zoning because of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So we have 5 other meetings scheduled in 2024 per this. March, May, July, September, and November. We have the dates on that schedule. Does anyone see any reason why those dates are not workable and or insufficient for our purposes?
Miranda?
No, I'm just looking.
Oh, I thought you raised your finger.
No, I'm just the wheels are turning slowly at this point.
Just because we've been at this for almost 2 hours, there's no reason they should be slowing down.
My 3 kids say otherwise. Right.
Yeah.
No, this looks fine.
Yeah, I can see us continuing to sort of unofficially keep the even numbered months open for special meetings, because I think we may want to do a special meeting as we see the draft of the Northwest quadrant, or whatever they're going to call it, plan.
Yeah, I concur with that. I think on our personal calendars, we should keep every third Tuesday open.
If I remember correctly, we have to formally adopt this schedule under the Freedom of Information stuff and get it published.
Although, Michael, I always think it's kind of sadistic that we have this lined up every week with Conservation Commission 2 nights in a row. You're killing me.
It's been like that for years.
Yes.
Don't you worry, because if you join the Inland Wetlands Commission, you can live my schedule with Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of the third.
My lack of wetland knowledge will protect me.
No, I mean, we can change it up. But you know, we just shuffled around the Agriculture Committee. So if there's a better time, we can do it. Otherwise,
it's all right. It's kind of worth just ripping off the band-aid.
the sadism is the default. So we need an alternative to the sadism before we approve it. All right.
I move we accept the schedule proposed in the agenda.
A second. Enthusiasm.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Miranda.
Okay. Anybody opposed? Good. I don't have to call a roll.
Got it. Meeting schedule adopted.
Okay. Now we've made the town clerk happy.
Yes, they'll stop yelling at me. Thank you. That's all we got, folks.
Yep. Motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Tom is thumbs upping. I think that's a
Yes.
second.
Second. Anybody opposed? So Michael can stop the recording.